My name's Amelia, and I'm 29 years old. For the past 5 years, I've been making a living as an event planner. Weddings, birthdays, anniversaries, you name it, I've organized it. It's not what I thought I'd be doing when I was younger, but life has a funny way of surprising you. I studied economics in college, but that's not where my passion lay. During my time there, I found myself drawn to organizing educational and entertainment events on campus. It started small, a study group here, a movie night there. But before I knew it, I was the go-to person for any event that needed planning. After graduation, I knew I couldn't see myself crunching numbers in an office. So, I took a leap of faith and started my own event planning business. It wasn't easy at first. I had to build my reputation from scratch, taking on any job I could get. No event is too small, I'd tell potential clients with a smile, even as I worried about making rent that month. But slowly, surely, word spread. One satisfied client led to another, and before I knew it, I had more work than I could handle. 5 years flew by, and here I am, with a thriving business and a reputation I'm proud of. Today, I'm sitting across from Mr. Johnson, a successful businessman who's turning 50 next month. He wants a party to remember, and I'm determined to give him just that. So, Mr. Johnson, I say, pulling out my notebook, what did you have in mind for your big day? He leans back in his chair, a thoughtful look on his face. Well, I was thinking something classy. Maybe a black tie affair at the Grand Hotel? I nod, jotting down notes. That's a great venue. We could do a classic Hollywood theme. Red carpet entrance, paparazzi-style photographers. As I'm mid-sentence, my phone buzzes. I glance at it, ready to ignore the call, but the name on the screen makes me pause. It's my sister, Sarah. Now, I should probably explain about my family. It's complicated. I have a younger sister, Sarah, who's 7 years my junior. She's always been the apple of our parents' eye. Don't get me wrong, my parents took care of me too, but there was always a difference in how they treated us. When I went to college, they couldn't find the money to help me out. It was my grandmother who stepped in, bless her soul. But a few years later, when Sarah went to college, suddenly, my parents had no problem paying for her tuition and a rented apartment. It stung, I won't lie. Over the years, I've learned to accept it, but it's left a mark. I don't talk to my family much these days. So, seeing Sarah's name on my phone is a surprise. I'm sorry, Mr. Johnson, I say, standing up. Would you excuse me for a moment? It's my sister, and she rarely calls. He waves me off with a kind smile. Of course, take your time. I step out of the room and answer the phone. Sarah, is everything okay? Amelia, her voice is bright, excited. You need to come over to Mom and Dad's right away. We have big news. I sigh, knowing I'll regret this. All right, I'll be there as soon as I can. I hang up and return to Mr. Johnson, apologizing profusely. I'm so sorry, but I have a family emergency. Can we reschedule for tomorrow? He's understanding, thankfully. I drove to my parents' house, with a knot in my stomach. It had been months since I'd last been there, and I wasn't exactly looking forward to this impromptu family gathering. I rang the doorbell, and my mother answered, a forced smile on her face. Amelia, dear, come in. The living room was crowded. My father sat in his usual armchair, Sarah was perched on the couch, practically vibrating with excitement. Next to her was a man I didn't recognize, about my age, with a polite smile. Amelia. Sarah jumped up, grabbing the man's hand and pulling him forward. This is Mark, my fiancé. I blinked, surprised. Fiancé? Wow, congratulations. Mark seemed nice enough, but I couldn't help wondering how long they'd been together. Sarah had never mentioned him before. So, I said, turning to Sarah, is this why you called me over? To meet Mark? Sarah's smile widened. Well, partly. But there's more. She clasped her hands together, practically bouncing. We're having an engagement party soon, and I want you to plan it. I felt a sinking feeling in my stomach. Oh, Sarah, I don't know. I'm pretty booked up right now. Nonsense, my father interrupted, his voice gruff. This is your sister we're talking about. Family comes first. I bit back a retort about how family hadn't come first when I needed help with college. Instead, I forced a smile. It's not that simple, Dad. I have commitments to other clients. But you're the best at this stuff, Sarah insisted. And I want the most amazing engagement party ever. Of course it'll be free. You wouldn't charge your own sister, would you? I looked around the room, seeing expectant faces. Even Mark looked like he assumed I'd do this for nothing. I felt cornered. Okay, I said finally, my voice tight. I'll organize it for free. But you'll need to cover all the other expenses, venue, catering, decorations, music, everything else. Sarah squealed and hugged me. You're the best, Amelia. We'll pay for everything else, promise. As I left the house an hour later, after listening to Sarah's grand ideas for her perfect engagement party, I felt a mixture of regret and resignation. I'd have to call Mr. Johnson and cancel our rescheduled meeting. There went a lucrative contract. Back home, I picked up my phone and dialed Mr. Johnson's number. Mr. Johnson? It's Amelia. I'm so sorry, but I won't be able to take on your birthday party after all. A family obligation has come up. My friend Lisa is also an event planner. She's excellent. I can give you her contact information if you'd like. After passing along Lisa's details and apologizing once more, I hung up. I stared at my phone, a sense of unease growing in my stomach. I'd just turned down a major client for a job I wasn't even getting paid for. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of planning and preparations. I secured a beautiful restaurant for the date Sarah wanted. It wasn't easy, the place was popular and usually booked months in advance. But Tony, the owner of the restaurant, couldn't resist my pressure. I also worked with the chef to create a spread that would impress even the most discerning guests. Then came the decorations, the music, the invitations, every detail had to be perfect. I called my go-to DJ, Mike, to book him for the event. He agreed, albeit reluctantly. I had similar conversations with all my usual contractors, the florist, the cake baker, the photographer. They all trusted me enough to agree to delayed payment, but I could sense their unease. As the days passed, I found myself turning down other jobs to focus on Sarah's party. It was eating into my income, but I told myself it would be worth it to see my sister happy. Finally, with everything arranged, I sat down to create the invoice. I carefully itemized every expense, from the venue rental to the last flower in the centerpieces. The total was substantial. I took a deep breath and emailed the invoice to Sarah. There, I muttered to myself. All done. That evening, my phone rang. It was Sarah. Hey sis, I answered. Did you get the invoice? There was a moment of silence, then Sarah's voice came through, sickly sweet. Amelia, darling, there must be some mistake. Why are you sending me a bill? I frowned, confused. What do you mean? It's the invoice for all the expenses for your engagement party. Remember, you said you'd cover everything except my fee? Sarah laughed, a sound that sent chills down my spine. Oh, Amelia. I thought you understood. You're supposed to pay for all of this. You make so much money with your business. I was speechless. My mind raced, thinking of all the vendors waiting to be paid, all the promises I'd made based on Sarah's word. Sarah, listen to me, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I organized this for free, which is already a huge favor. I can't pay for everything else too. You promised. But Sarah had already hung up. I tried calling my parents, hoping they could talk some sense into Sarah. But to my horror, they took her side. They insisted I should pay, that it was my duty as the successful daughter. I hung up, my hands shaking with anger and disbelief. How could they do this to me? How could they expect me to bankrupt myself for a party? As I sat there, trying to figure out what to do, a notification popped up on my phone. It was a post from Sarah on social media. Curious, I clicked on it. "Can't wait for tomorrow's engagement party," the post read. "So excited to celebrate with everyone. We've spent so much to make it perfect." In that moment, something snapped inside me. If Sarah wanted to play games, well, two could play at that. My fingers trembled as I dialed the restaurant's number. It was late, but I knew Tony would still be there, closing up after the night's service. "Tony? It's Amelia. I'm so sorry, but I need to cancel tomorrow's event. I'll pay you a cancellation fee. And I'll make this up to you, I swear." Tony sighed. "All right, Amelia. I trust you. But this isn't like you." One by one, I called all the vendors. The florist, the DJ, the cake baker, everyone. Each call was painful, each explanation more humiliating than the last. By the time I finished, my savings account was significantly lighter, but at least my professional relationships were intact. I'd paid everyone their fees and cancellation charges out of my own pocket. I barely slept that night. When morning came, I made myself a strong cup of coffee and settled in front of my computer. I knew Sarah would be live streaming her arrival at the restaurant. I wanted to see this. Right on schedule, Sarah's beaming face appeared on my screen. She was outside the restaurant, surrounded by a group of excited-looking friends and family members. "We're here," Sarah chirped into her phone camera. "I can't wait to show you guys everything. It's going to be amazing." I watched as she confidently strode up to the restaurant doors, her fiancé Mark in tow. She reached for the handle, still chattering away to her viewers. "And here we, oh." The smile froze on Sarah's face as she tugged at the door. It didn't budge. "That's weird," she laughed nervously, trying again. "It must be stuck." But it wasn't stuck. Sarah's eyes widened as she finally noticed the sign on the door. "Event cancelled," it read in bold letters. The live stream erupted in confused comments. Sarah's face paled as she turned to Mark, who looked equally bewildered. I couldn't help but feel a twinge of satisfaction as I watched the chaos unfold. It was petty, I knew, but after years of being the family doormat, it felt good to finally stand up for myself. My phone started buzzing almost immediately. Sarah's name flashed on the screen. I took a deep breath and answered. "Hello, Sarah." "Amelia," she screeched. "What the hell is going on? The restaurant is closed. Everything's ruined." I kept my voice calm. "Well, Sarah, since you refused to pay for the event you asked me to organize, I had to cancel it. I couldn't let my contractors go unpaid." But what about the food?" Mark's voice came through faintly in the background. "Where's all the food we were supposed to have?" I couldn't help but smile a little. "Oh, the food? I donated it to a homeless shelter. At least someone will enjoy it." More screaming followed, but I'd had enough. I hung up the phone. About 10 minutes later, my phone rang again. My mother's voice came through, shrill and angry. "Amelia, how could you do this to your sister? We raised you better than this." I felt a surge of frustration. "Mom, did Sarah tell you what she tried to do? She wanted me to pay for everything." "So what?" My father's voice boomed in the background. "You're doing well for yourself. You could have helped your sister out." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Dad, we're talking about thousands of dollars here. I'm not made of money." "You're just being selfish," my mother snapped. "Your poor sister is heartbroken. Her special day is ruined because of your greed." I tried to stay calm, but their words were cutting deep. "Greed? I organized everything for free. I even paid cancellation fees out of my own pocket." But they weren't listening. My mother's next words felt like a slap in the face. "You know what I think?" she said, her voice cold. "I think you did this because you're jealous. You're almost 30, Amelia. No husband, no children. You couldn't stand to see her getting married while you have no one. I hung up the phone, my hands shaking. Tears stung my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. How dare they? How dare they twist this around and make me the villain? As I sat there, trying to process everything that had happened, an idea struck me. If Sarah and Mark had promised to pay for everything, where did that money go? They must have had it, right? I opened my laptop and drafted an email. In it, I detailed all the expenses I had incurred, including the cancellation fees. I demanded that Sarah and Mark reimburse me for every penny. If you don't pay, I wrote, my fingers flying over the keyboard, I'll be forced to take legal action. I hit send before I could second guess myself. It was a bold move, I knew, but I was done being the family pushover. Within minutes, my phone was buzzing again. This time, it was a barrage of text messages from Sarah and Mark. I steeled myself and opened them. The messages were a mix of threats and insults. Sarah called me every name in the book, while Mark threatened to ruin me if I tried to take them to court. I saved screenshots of every message. If this did end up in court, I wanted all the evidence I could get. I also needed advice from someone who might have some insight into Sarah's fiancé and his family. That's when I remembered my Aunt Linda. She always seemed to know all the town gossip. Maybe she could tell me something about Mark and his family. I dialed her number, hoping she'd be willing to talk. Aunt Linda? It's Amelia. I need to ask you something about Sarah's fiancé. Aunt Linda's voice crackled through the phone, warm and familiar. Amelia, dear. It's been ages. What do you want to know about Mark? I took a deep breath. Well, I was wondering if you knew anything about his family, their financial situation. Oh, honey, Aunt Linda chuckled. You're asking the right person. The Thompsons, that's Mark's family, they're quite well off. They own a chain of laundromats across the city, and word is they've got their fingers in some lucrative real estate deals too. I felt my jaw drop. Wait, what? They're wealthy? Oh yes, very much so, Aunt Linda continued, oblivious to my shock. Why, I heard they gave Mark a hefty sum to arrange that engagement party. $30,000, if the rumors are true. My mind was reeling. $30,000? And they had tried to make me pay for everything? After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence for a few minutes. Then, determination set in. I knew what I had to do next. It took some digging, but I managed to find the address of Mark's parents. Without giving myself time to second-guess my decision, I got in my car and drove there. The house was impressive, a large, well-maintained property in one of the nicest neighborhoods in town. I took a deep breath and rang the doorbell. A middle-aged woman answered, her eyebrows raised in curiosity. Can I help you? Mrs. Thompson? I asked. When she nodded, I continued, I'm Amelia, Sarah's sister. I need to talk to you and your husband about Mark and the engagement party. She looked surprised, but invited me in. Soon, I was sitting in their living room, facing both of Mark's parents. Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, I began, my voice steadier than I felt, I'm here because I think you should know what happened with the engagement party. Over the next half hour, I explained everything. How Sarah had asked me to organize the party for free. How they had promised to pay for everything else, but then refused. How I had been forced to cancel everything and pay the cancellation fees myself. As I spoke, I saw the shock and dismay growing on their faces. When I finished, there was a long silence. Finally, Mr. Thompson spoke, his voice tight with anger. We gave Mark $30,000 for this party. He told us everything was paid for. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. They believed me. Mr. Thompson left the room and returned a few minutes later with his checkbook. He wrote out a check for the full amount I had spent, plus a little extra for my trouble. It's the least we can do, he said, handing it to me. And don't worry, we'll be having a very serious conversation with Mark and Sarah about their behavior. As I left their house, I felt a mix of emotions, relief, vindication, but also sadness. This whole ordeal had exposed some ugly truths about my sister and her fiancé. On the drive home, my phone buzzed with texts. It was Sarah and Mark again, but this time their tone was very different. Gone were the threats and insults, replaced by panicked apologies and pleas for forgiveness. In the weeks that followed, I heard through the grapevine about the fallout from my visit to the Thompsons. Aunt Linda kept me updated. "You won't believe this, Amelia," she said during one of our phone calls. "Mark's parents have cut him off completely. No more monthly allowance, no financial support for the wedding, nothing." I couldn't help but feel a twinge of satisfaction. "Really? That's quite drastic." Aunt Linda's voice lowered conspiratorially. "Oh, honey, they were furious. Apparently, they don't take kindly to being lied to and having their money misused. Can't say I blame them." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "What about the wedding? Is it still happening?" There was a pause, then Aunt Linda chuckled. "Well, that's the kicker. Without Mommy and Daddy's money, Mark and Sarah can't afford the lavish wedding they were planning. Last I heard, they'd postponed it indefinitely." My parents, predictably, didn't see it that way. They blamed me for Sarah's misfortune, conveniently forgetting that it was her own actions that had led to this situation. "You've ruined your sister's life," my mother said during one particularly heated phone call. "Are you happy now?" I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Mom, Sarah, and Mark tried to scam me out of thousands of dollars. They lied to everyone, including Mark's parents. How is that my fault?" But it was like talking to a brick wall. In their eyes, Sarah could do no wrong, and I was the villain who had destroyed her happiness. Despite the family drama, my life went on. I threw myself back into my work, rebuilding the client base I had neglected during the engagement party fiasco. Slowly but surely, things started to look up. One day, as I was leaving a meeting with a new client, I ran into Mr. Johnson, the man whose 50th birthday party I had canceled to work on Sarah's engagement. "Amelia," he called out, a smile on his face. "How have you been?" I felt a pang of guilt. "Mr. Johnson, I'm so sorry about canceling on you like that. It was unprofessional of me." He waved off my apology. "No need for that. Your friend Lisa did a wonderful job with the party. But I have to say, I missed your personal touch." An idea struck me. "Well, if you're planning any events in the future, I'd love the opportunity to make it up to you." Mr. Johnson's eyes twinkled. "As a matter of fact, my company's 25th anniversary is coming up. How would you like to handle that?" As I walked away, contract in hand, I couldn't help but feel that things were finally looking up. Yes, my relationship with my family was strained, but my business was thriving, and I had my self-respect intact. One evening, as I was poring over seating arrangements, a loud knock at my apartment door startled me. I wasn't expecting anyone. Cautiously, I approached the door and looked through the peephole. To my shock, I saw Sarah and Mark standing there. Against my better judgment, I opened the door. "What are you doing here?" Sarah brazenly pushed past me into the apartment, Mark trailing behind her. "We're moving in," she announced. I blinked, sure I'd misheard. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," Sarah said, her tone accusatory. "Because of you, Mark's parents cut us off. No money for the wedding, no allowance, nothing. So, we decided we're going to live here." I couldn't help it, I laughed. The sheer audacity of their plan was almost impressive. "You can't be serious. This is my home. You can't just decide to move in." Mark stepped forward, his face twisted in anger. "You owe us, Amelia. You ruined everything." I felt my patience snap. "I owe you nothing. You tried to scam me, remember? Now get out of my apartment." As I shut the door behind them, I heard Sarah's parting shot, "You'll be sorry." A few days later, I returned home from a meeting to find my apartment door surrounded by a strange, foamy substance. It took me a moment to realize what I was seeing: construction foam hardened around the entire perimeter of my door. Furious, I called a locksmith service to remove the foam and replace my locks. As I waited, my neighbor, Mrs. Chen, approached me. "Amelia, dear," she said, concern etched on her face. "I saw what happened. I have it on video if you need it." Sure enough, Mrs. Chen's security camera had captured Sarah and Mark in the act of vandalizing my door. The footage was clear as day. Armed with this evidence, I went straight to the police station. I filed a report for property damage and requested a restraining order against both Sarah and Mark. The legal process was draining, but ultimately satisfying. The court fined Sarah and Mark for the damage to my apartment and ordered them to cover the costs of repairs. More importantly, they were banned from coming within 500 feet of me for the next 2 years. When my parents found out, they were livid, not at Sarah, of course, but at me. They couldn't believe I'd taken legal action against my own sister. "How could you do this to your family?" my mother wailed over the phone. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "No, Mom. The question is, how could you support Sarah after everything she's done? I'm done being the family scapegoat." With that, I hung up the phone and blocked their numbers. It hurt, cutting ties with my family, but I knew it was necessary for my own well-being. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into work. Mr. Johnson's anniversary party was a resounding success, earning me glowing reviews and a slew of new clients. As I stood at the back of the beautifully decorated hall, watching the guests enjoy themselves, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. Yes, I'd lost my family, but I'd gained something far more valuable: self-respect and the knowledge that I could stand on my own 2 feet.
Hey everyone, I'm Sarah, 15, and living in a posh suburb of Chicago. Right now, I'm in my room, sketching in my favorite armchair by the window when I hear my dad's car pull up. I jump up, excited to show him my latest piece. "Dad, you're home early. Check this out." I call as I rush downstairs, holding up my sketch pad. My dad, James, glances over with a half smile. "That's nice, sweetheart. Listen, I've got a surprise for you," he says, sounding mysterious. My heart skips a beat. Maybe he's finally letting me go to that art camp I've been begging for. But no, something else entirely is about to happen. In walks this tall, blonde woman, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Sarah, this is Veronica. We've been seeing each other, and she's going to be staying with us for a while." I force a smile, but inside I'm freaking out. It's been just me and Dad since Mom passed away 3 years ago. We were a team. Fast forward a few weeks, and Veronica has completely taken over the house, redecorating, rearranging, and worst of all, monopolizing Dad's time. One afternoon, I'm in the kitchen with my best friend, Zoe. I swear, Zoe, it's like I don't even exist anymore. Yesterday I tried to talk to Dad about my art project, and Veronica interrupted to show him some dumb modeling photos. Zoe rolls her eyes. "That sucks, Sar. Have you tried talking to your dad?" I nod. "Yeah, but he just says I need to give her a chance and make her feel welcome. It's like he's forgotten I live here too." Just then, Veronica strolls into the kitchen, wearing one of Dad's shirts and not much else. "Oh, Sarah, didn't realize you'd be home so early. Your father and I were just napping." I cringe. "This is my friend Zoe. We're working on a school project." Veronica barely glances at Zoe. "That's nice, dear. Oh, by the way, I moved some of your art supplies to the garage. They were cluttering up the living room." Before I can respond, she's gone, leaving me fuming. Zoe gives me a sympathetic squeeze on the arm. Later that night, I try to talk to Dad one more time. I find him in his study, surrounded by paperwork. "Hey, Dad, got a minute?" I ask, hoping for some kind of connection. He looks up, distracted. "Sure, honey. What's up?" "I was wondering if maybe we could have dinner together tomorrow night, just the two of us, like old times." He hesitates, and I already know what he's going to say. "Oh, Sarah, I'm sorry. Veronica and I have reservations at that new French place. Maybe another time." I nod, swallowing my disappointment. As I turn to leave, he calls out, "Actually, Sarah, we need to have a family meeting tomorrow after school. There's something important we need to discuss. A knot forms in my stomach. Something tells me this family meeting isn't going to be good news. The next day, I walk into the living room, my heart racing. Dad and Veronica are seated, looking way too serious for my liking. Sarah, honey, sit down. We need to talk, Dad says, his voice tense. I sit, bracing myself. We've decided it's best for you to attend Oak Ridge Academy, he says. It's an excellent boarding school upstate. My jaw drops. Boarding school? But why? I don't want to go. It's a wonderful opportunity, Sarah. Veronica chimes in, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. You'll get a top-notch education. Suddenly, a memory flashes in my mind. Last week, I overheard them talking in the kitchen. Veronica's voice echoed. James, I'm worried about Sarah. She's always around. Don't you think she's ruining our romance? Back in the present, I stand up, shaking. This was your idea, wasn't it? I point at Veronica. You want to get rid of me. Sarah, that's enough, Dad says sternly. This decision is final. I storm to my room, slamming the door behind me. Grabbing my phone, I call the only person who might help, Aunt Lisa. Aunt Lisa, please, you have to talk to Dad. He's sending me away. Oh, sweetie, she sighs. I'll try, but you know how stubborn your father can be. The next few days are a blur of pleading, bargaining, and tears, but nothing works. Before I know it, I'm standing in front of Oak Ridge Academy, a huge, imposing building that feels more like a prison than a school. This is for the best, Sarah, Dad says, not even looking me in the eye. You'll see. Veronica doesn't even bother to get out of the car as they drive away, leaving me feeling more alone than I've ever felt in my life. The first few weeks at Oak Ridge are a nightmare. Strict rules, demanding classes, and the gnawing homesickness. My roommate Emily is nice enough, but I miss my friends, my room, my art. One day, after getting chewed out by my history teacher for daydreaming, I text Dad, I hate it here. Please let me come home. His response comes hours later, you'll adjust. Give it time. I stare at my phone, fighting back tears. That's when I overhear a group of girls gossiping nearby. Did you hear about the new girl? Her dad shipped her off so he could shack up with his girlfriend. No way. That's so messed up. Yeah, I heard the girlfriend's barely older than us. My face burned with shame and anger. Is that what everyone thought? That I'd been tossed aside for Dad's midlife crisis? That night, lying in my narrow bed, listening to Emily's soft snores, I made a decision. If Dad and Veronica wanted me gone so badly, fine. I'd show them I didn't need them. I would excel at this school, make my own way, and never rely on them again. Months flew by, and slowly but surely, I started to find my footing at Oak Ridge. Don't get me wrong, I still miss home, but I was determined to make the best of it. One day in the cafeteria, a girl with bright blue hair plopped down next to me. You're the new kid, right? I'm Mia. I nodded, taking in her rebellious vibe. Sarah, nice to meet you. Don't let this place get you down, Maya said, gesturing around. It's all a game, and once you figure out the rules, you can bend them. Maya introduced me to her friend, Tyler, a computer genius with a heart of gold. The three of us became inseparable, and suddenly, Oak Ridge didn't seem so bad. I threw myself into my studies, determined to prove I belonged here. My grades soared, especially in art class. Miss Rodriguez, my art teacher, took me under her wing. Sarah, your work is exceptional, she said one day, examining my latest painting. Have you considered entering the National Young Artist Competition? I hesitated. I don't know. It's pretty prestigious. Exactly, Miss Rodriguez smiled. And you have the talent to win it. Meanwhile, things at home were weird. Dad's calls became less frequent, and when we did talk, he seemed distracted. Veronica was always in the background, her voice a constant reminder of why I was here. One afternoon, I was heading to Miss Rodriguez's class when I overheard two staff members talking. It's the third month James Henderson has missed the tuition payment. If this continues, we'll have to discuss Sarah's enrollment status. My heart raced. Dad was having money problems. That didn't make sense. His real estate business had always been successful. I confided in Mia and Tyler. Guys, something's not right. Can you help me dig into this? Tyler cracked his knuckles. Leave it to me. If there's dirt to be found, I'll find it. For weeks, we pored over public records and financial reports. Tyler's computer skills were a godsend, helping us navigate the complex world of business finances. Sarah, look at this. Tyler said one night, pointing at his laptop screen. These numbers don't add up. There are inconsistencies in your dad's business reports. Maya leaned in. Yeah, and look at these purchases. Designer clothes, fancy restaurants, spa treatments. Is your dad suddenly into self-care? I felt sick. That has to be Veronica. She's bleeding him dry. Despite the drama unfolding back home, I channeled my emotions into my art. Miss Rodriguez pushed me harder than ever, helping me prepare for the National Young Artists Competition. The night before the submission deadline, I put the finishing touches on my piece, a haunting portrait that captured the pain of betrayal and the strength found in independence. Weeks later, Miss Rodriguez burst into the art room, waving an envelope. Sarah, you did it. You won first place in the National Young Artists Competition. The room erupted in cheers as my classmates congratulated me. My phone buzzed with a news alert, and I froze when I saw the headline. Unknown teen prodigy wins National Art Competition. Judges stunned. Spring break finally rolled around, and I headed home, my heart a mix of excitement and dread. As the cab pulled up to our house, I knew something was off. The lawn was overgrown, and Dad's car looked like it hadn't been washed in months. Inside, the house was a mess. Takeout containers littered the kitchen, and a layer of dust coated everything. Dad emerged from his study, looking haggard and older than I remembered. Sarah, I didn't expect you to come home for break. I dropped my bag. Surprise. What's going on here, Dad? He ran a hand through his thinning hair. It's nothing. Just been busy with work. How's school? I wasn't buying it. Cut the act, Dad. I know about the missed tuition payments. What's really going on? His face fell. It's just a temporary cash flow issue. I've got it under control. That's when Veronica sauntered in, dripping in jewelry and designer clothes. Oh, Sarah, you're here. How nice. I couldn't hold back anymore. Nice clothes, Veronica. Must have cost a fortune, considering Dad can't even pay my school fees. Dad's eyes widened. Sarah, that's enough. But I was on a roll. I pulled out the documents Tyler had helped me compile. No, Dad, it's not. Look at this. Your accounts are being drained, and it's not just because of business troubles. Dad waved his hand dismissively. You don't understand business, Sarah. This is adult stuff. Oh yeah, I shot back, then explained these transactions. Designer boutiques, spa retreats, jewelry stores. Unless you've developed expensive new hobbies, I'm guessing this is all Veronica. Veronica's face twisted into an ugly sneer. You little brat, Veronica hissed, her voice sharp with venom. You have no idea what you're talking about. Don't I? Shot back, pulling out my phone and showing them the banking app. Did you really think I wouldn't notice? You added yourself to Dad's accounts. You've been siphoning money for months. Dad's face drained of color. Veronica, is this true? His voice wavered, disbelief etched in every word. Veronica tried to backpedal, her expression shifting from fury to panic, but the evidence was undeniable. The truth unraveled, and I could see the weight of realization in Dad's eyes. He seemed to age years in just a few moments. I'm so sorry, Sarah, he whispered, his voice hoarse. I've been such a fool. Just then, the doorbell rang. 2 police officers stood outside, flanked by Aunt Lisa. One officer stepped forward. James Henderson, we need to ask you some questions about financial irregularities in your business. Dad's expression shifted from shock to confusion. What? Who reported this? Aunt Lisa stepped forward, her gaze steady. I did, James. When Sarah told me what was going on, I couldn't just stand by and watch everything crumble. As the officers began questioning Dad, Veronica made a break for it, grabbing her purse and bolting toward the door. But Aunt Lisa, quicker than expected, stuck out her foot, sending Veronica sprawling to the ground. It was the last desperate move in a saga that had spiraled out of control. The aftermath was a whirlwind. Veronica was arrested for fraud, and Dad faced serious legal consequences for his role in the financial mismanagement. As for me, I made the tough decision to move in with Aunt Lisa, leaving the past behind. 2 years later, I'm thriving at a top art school, my talent finally getting the recognition it deserves. As I stand in front of my latest exhibition, surrounded by people who truly appreciate my work, I can't help but reflect on how far I've come. That scared, betrayed girl from Oak Ridge feels like a lifetime ago. I'm stronger now, wiser, and finally free from the toxic people who tried to hold me back. What would you have done if you were in Sarah's shoes? Would you have forgiven your father for choosing his girlfriend over you and sending you away to boarding school? Or would you have cut ties completely? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Hey, I'm Linda, a 28-year-old marketing executive with a flair for creativity and a talent for transforming coffee into successful campaigns. I live what most people would call a fairy tale life in downtown Chicago with my husband Mark, a brilliant software engineer who's as charming as he is smart. We met in the most classic rom-com way, bumping into each other at a coffee shop. One spilled latte, a whirlwind romance, and a dream wedding later. Here we are, 2 years into marriage and talking about starting a family. Mark, have you thought about nursery colors? I asked one evening, scrolling through Pinterest. Huh? Oh, yeah. How about blue? He replied, barely looking up from his laptop. I chuckled. Blue? That's so predictable. How about a nice sunny yellow? Whatever you think is best, honey, he said with a distracted smile. Little did I know, beneath our picture-perfect life, trouble was brewing. Mark's parents, Richard and Linda, had never fully warmed up to me. I get it, I'm not from their world of country clubs and trust funds, but a little acceptance would be nice. Take last week's family dinner, for example. Richard raised his glass, his gaze sharp like a hawk's. To family, he said, his voice laced with hidden meaning. May it grow, appropriately. I nearly choked on my wine. Did he really just say that? Not to be outdone, Linda added with her signature passive-aggressive sweetness. Yes, dear. Motherhood isn't for everyone, you know. We hope you're ready for the challenge. I forced a smile, squeezing Mark's hand under the table. He squeezed back but didn't say a word. Thanks for the backup, hubby. Months passed, and despite our efforts, no baby. That's when Richard suggested Dr. Anderson, a renowned fertility specialist. Only the best for family, he said, his smile never quite reaching his eyes. I nodded, trying to ignore the sinking feeling in my gut. Thank goodness for Emma, my colleague and best friend. Linda, you okay? She asked one day, noticing my distracted mood. Yeah, just family stuff, I sighed. Mark's parents again? She asked, rolling her eyes. Girl, you need to stand up to them. I know, it's just complicated, I muttered, not wanting to get into it. But as I left work that day, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Little did I know, my seemingly perfect life was about to unravel in ways I couldn't have imagined. 6 months into our baby-making journey, I was starting to feel like a broken record. Another day, another negative pregnancy test. It felt like a punch to the gut every time. And don't even get me started on Dr. Anderson. The guy was acting stranger by the day. Dr. Anderson, what do these results mean? I asked during our last appointment, trying to keep the desperation out of my voice. He shuffled his papers, avoiding eye contact. Well, Mrs. Johnson, it's inconclusive at this point. Inconclusive? What does that even mean? Things at home weren't much better. One night, I overheard Mark and his dad having a heated argument. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but Richard's voice carried like a foghorn. She's not good enough for this family, he boomed, if she can't even give you a child. I couldn't make out the rest, but my heart sank faster than an elevator with cut cables. Mark's response was too quiet to hear. Probably some half-hearted defense. Thanks for nothing, hubby. At work, Emma could sense something was wrong. Linda, you look like you've been through hell. What's going on? I spilled everything, the failed test, Dr. Anderson's evasiveness, the argument I overheard. Maybe you should get a second opinion, she suggested. Something feels off about Dr. Anderson. I was mulling over Emma's advice when things took an even weirder turn. I started noticing a car following me around. At first, I thought I was being paranoid. But after a few days, I was sure someone was tailing me. One afternoon, I'd had enough. I whipped my car around and confronted the driver. Who are you and why are you following me? The guy looked panicked. I'm just... Spill it, I demanded. He cracked almost immediately. Turns out Richard had hired him to keep tabs on me. Can you believe that? Meanwhile, Mark was practically a ghost in our marriage. Late nights at work had become his new routine, and whenever I tried to talk to him, he either snapped or completely ignored me. Mark, can we talk? I asked one night, hoping for some connection. Not now, Linda. I'm tired, he mumbled, not even bothering to look up from his phone. The final blow came at a charity event, orchestrated by none other than my dear mother-in-law. Oh, Linda, she exclaimed, feigning surprise. Have you met Vanessa? She and Mark were so close in college. Such a shame things didn't work out. Vanessa smiled sweetly, but there was a predatory glint in her eyes. As I watched her and Mark chatting, laughing at old inside jokes, I felt the last fragile threads of my life unraveling. Standing there, watching my husband with his ex, I realized something had to change. This wasn't the life I had signed up for. It was time to start asking some hard questions and demanding real answers. One thing was crystal clear: I deserved better than this circus masquerading as a family. Enough was enough. I decided to take control and booked an appointment with Dr. Martinez, another fertility specialist. After a battery of tests, she delivered the news. Mrs. Johnson, I can say with certainty that you're perfectly capable of conceiving. There's no medical reason preventing you from getting pregnant. Felt like I'd been blindsided. But Dr. Anderson said, I'm sorry, but Dr. Anderson's diagnosis seems questionable at best, she replied. Armed with this bombshell, I marched into Dr. Anderson's office. Care to explain why Dr. Martinez says I'm perfectly fertile? His face went pale. Mrs. Johnson, I can explain. Start talking, I demanded. And he did. He spilled everything. Richard had tried to bribe him into falsely diagnosing me as infertile. I didn't take the money, Dr. Anderson stammered, but I did stall your treatment. I was livid. You played with my emotions, my marriage, my future. How dare you? Leaving his office, I knew I had to dig deeper. That night, I set up a hidden camera in our living room. Call it intuition, but something about Mark's late nights felt off. 2 days later, I watched the footage, and my world crumbled. There was Mark, wrapped around Vanessa, on our couch. Our couch. I felt sick. Immediately, I called Emma, my hands shaking. I need your help. What's wrong? She asked. I need to hack into Mark's emails. Can you help? Emma, ever the loyal friend, came through like a pro. What we uncovered made my blood run cold. Emails between Mark, Richard, and Linda, all plotting to push me out of the family. Look at this, Emma pointed at the screen. There's something here about Richard's company too. We dug deeper and hit the jackpot. Evidence of a major financial scandal. Karma's a real piece of work, isn't it, Richard? Just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, Linda invited me for tea. Sitting across from me, she slid a document across the table. It's just a formality, dear, she said, her smile as fake as her pearls. A post-nuptial agreement to protect everyone's interests. I wanted to laugh in her face, but instead, I smiled sweetly. I'll have my lawyer look it over. Speaking of lawyers, I realized I needed one. Swallowing my pride, I made a call I never thought I would. Jack, it's Rita. I need your help. We hadn't spoken in years, but desperate times call for desperate measures. As I explained everything to my estranged brother, a plan began forming in my mind. It was time for some good old-fashioned revenge. Over the next few weeks, I became a regular Sherlock Holmes. I gathered every scrap of evidence. The fertility test results, a recording of Dr. Anderson's confession, thank you, voice recorder app, the video of Mark's betrayal, those damning emails, and proof of Richard's financial misdeeds. Each piece of evidence felt like a nail in their coffin. You sure about this, Linda? Emma asked. One night, as we went over everything, I nodded with a grim smile. They messed with the wrong woman. It was time they learned that actions have consequences. Looking at the mountain of evidence before me, I felt a strange mix of sadness and determination. This wasn't how I'd imagined my fairy tale marriage would end, but sometimes you have to burn it all down to build something better. Justice was approaching, and I was ready. They thought they could break me, push me out, but they had no idea who they were dealing with. Linda Johnson doesn't go down without a fight, and boy, was I ready to fight. The moment of truth arrived on a sunny Saturday morning. I'd asked Mark to stay home, claiming we needed to talk about our future. As he walked into the living room, I sat there, cool as a cucumber, a folder in my lap. We do need to talk about our future, Mark, I said, my voice steadier than I felt, or rather, the lack of it. What do you mean? He asked, confusion written across his face. I laid it all out. His infidelity, the conspiracy with his parents, everything. With each revelation, the color drained from his face. How? How did you? He stammered. I ignored his question and handed him an envelope. Divorce papers. Sign them without contest or your family's dirty laundry goes public. He signed without a word. Good boy. Next up was Dr. Anderson. I anonymously sent a detailed report, along with his recorded confession, to the medical board. Bye-bye, medical license. For Richard, I had something special in store. I gave him a call. Hello, Linda. To what do I owe this pleasure? His voice dripped with sarcasm. Cut the crap, Richard. I know about your financial scandal. Transfer a hefty divorce settlement to me, or I'll make sure the world knows, too. There was a long pause. You wouldn't dare. Try me. He complied grudgingly. I almost felt bad. Almost. The coup de grace, I leaked the information about Richard's scandal to Emma's journalist friend. The story hit like a tsunami. Richard's company stocks nosedived, and the feds came knocking. Linda's social circle evaporated faster than spilled champagne. No more fancy galas for you, Linda. Even Vanessa got her comeuppance. An anonymous tip to her employer about her role in the scheme, and, poof, there went her job and reputation. As the dust settled, I found myself at a new beginning. With Richard's settlement, I started my own marketing firm with Emma. To new beginnings, Emma said, raising her glass in our brand new office. And karma, I added with a grin. 2 years flew by. I stood in my office admiring the Chicago skyline when my phone buzzed. Richard's company had filed for bankruptcy, and he was drowning in lawsuits. Mark. Last I'd heard, he was stuck in a dead-end job, his career in ruins. I placed a hand on my growing belly and smiled. Life had thrown me a curveball, but I'd hit it out of the park. This baby inside me was a promise of a better future. My new partner, a kind man I'd met through work, was everything Mark wasn't. As I felt a little kick, I made a silent vow. This child would know only love, respect, and loyalty, the true meaning of family. The sun was setting as I packed up, ready to head home. The sky was a canvas of orange and pink, as if it were celebrating with me. I faced betrayal and come out on top on my own terms. Walking out, I couldn't help but smirk. The price of betrayal had been high for them. For me, I was just getting started. Life's funny that way. Sometimes you've got to lose it all to win everything. And boy, had I won. If you were in my shoes, would you have taken revenge on your in-laws and ex-husband, or would you have walked away without looking back? What do you think is more empowering, getting even, or moving on? Hey everyone, I'm Olivia Reeves. I'm 28 now, working as a marketing executive. It's a good job, keeps me busy. But sometimes I catch myself staring out the office window, thinking about how I ended up here. The road wasn't easy, let me tell you. Growing up, our house was like a powder keg, always on the verge of blowing up. My dad, James, meant well. He'd say things like, "Come on, girls, let's all get along," with this hopeful look on his face. But it was never that simple. Vanessa, sweetheart, do you want the last cookie? My stepmom, Diane, would coo, acting like I didn't even exist. Vanessa, my stepsister, would smirk and snatch it, making a big show of how good it was. Thanks, Mom. You always know what I like. Meanwhile, I'd sit there, stomach growling, knowing better than to complain. Complaining just made things worse. Vanessa was younger than me, but she knew how to play the game. She'd wait until Diane was out of earshot and then whisper, "You're not really part of this family, you know. Mom and Dad just keep you around out of pity." I'd clench my fists under the table, trying not to cry. "That's not true," I'd mutter, but deep down, I sometimes wondered if she was right. The worst part, Vanessa was smart. She could twist things, make me look bad no matter what I did. If I did well in school, she'd tell Diane I was showing off. If I struggled, she'd mock me for being dumb. "Mom, Olivia's being mean to me again," she'd whine, right after pinching me or hiding my homework. Diane would swoop in, all concerned for her precious daughter. "Olivia, why can't you be nice to your sister? She's younger than you. You should set a good example." I tried to explain, but it never mattered. I was always the problem in their eyes. There was one time when I was 12 that I don't like to talk about, but it changed everything. Let's just say Vanessa went too far, and I got hurt, not just physically, but in a way that left scars you can't see. After that, I learned to keep everything inside. It was safer that way. No one could use my feelings against me if they didn't know I had any. School became my escape. I threw myself into my studies, staying late at the library just to avoid going home. My teachers noticed. "Olivia has so much potential," they'd say. It felt good to be seen for once. But the real lifesaver was Lucas, my next-door neighbor. Somehow, he saw through all the BS. We'd sit on his porch for hours talking about everything and nothing. You know you don't deserve how they treat you, right? He'd say, handing me a soda. I shrug, trying to play it cool. It's not that bad. Liv, come on. I've seen how they are. It's not okay. Those talks with Lucas kept me going. He was the one person I could be real with, the one place I didn't have to pretend. As I got older, I started planning my escape. College applications, part-time jobs, anything to get out of that house. I promised myself that one day I'd have a life where I didn't have to hide who I was. Looking back now, I realize how much that time shaped me. The secrets, the constant tension, always walking on eggshells. It made me who I am. Stronger, yes, but also more guarded than I'd like to admit. I stared down at the cream-colored envelope in my hands, my heart racing. Venus's college graduation invitation. After years of silence, this was the last thing I expected. You okay, Liv? Ethan's concerned voice snapped me out of my daze. Yeah, it's from Vanessa. She wants me at her graduation. Ethan frowned. Your stepsister. The one who made your life hell? I nodded, still processing. Maybe she's changed. People grow up, right? I don't know, babe. Sounds risky to me. I called Sophie, needing my best friend's take. Girl, are you crazy? Why would you even think about going? I don't know, Soph. Part of me hopes. Maybe we could start over. Sophie sighed. You've got a bigger heart than I do. Just be careful, okay? The day of the ceremony arrived, and I found myself smoothing down my dress, my stomach in knots. You sure about this? Ethan squeezed my hand. No, but I need to do it. We found seats near the back of the auditorium. As the graduates filed in, I spotted Vanessa, her face beaming with pride. Our eyes met, and to my surprise, she smiled and waved. Maybe this wasn't a mistake after all. The ceremony went on, and then Vanessa took the stage for her valedictorian speech. My chest swelled with unexpected pride. Thank you all for being here today, Vanessa began, her voice strong and confident. I want to talk about overcoming adversity and the power of family. I leaned forward, intrigued. I have a stepsister, Vanessa continued, her eyes locking on mine in the crowd. Olivia, stand up so everyone can see you. Confused but flattered, I stood, offering a small wave. Vanessa's smile turned sharp, almost predatory. Olivia had a tough childhood. She was always so angry, so difficult to live with. My blood ran cold. This couldn't be happening. When we were kids, Olivia had a breakdown. She became violent, dangerous even. But I stood by her. I protected her from herself. Whispers spread through the audience like wildfire. I felt Ethan tense beside me. I took her to therapy, covered for her outbursts, helped her become a functioning member of society. Tears burned in my eyes as Vanessa continued, twisting every painful memory into a narrative. That speech painted Vanessa as the hero and me as a basket case. Even now, Olivia struggles, but I'm proud of how far she's come under my guidance, Vanessa said, her voice dripping with condescension. I couldn't breathe. The room spun as years of carefully buried trauma came rushing back. Liv, we need to go, Ethan whispered urgently, but I was frozen in place, watching in horror as Vanessa detailed the most humiliating moments of my life. Remember when you tried to run away? Vanessa's voice was thick with false concern. If I hadn't found you. That was it, I bolted, pushing past startled audience members, desperate for air. Outside, I gulped in deep breaths, feeling my carefully constructed life crumble around me. Olivia, wait. Sophie ran after me, Ethan closed behind. How? How could she? I choked out between sobs. Sophie wrapped me in a fierce hug. She's a monster, Liv. None of what she said is true, she assured me. Ethan's face was dark with anger. We should go back in there and set the record straight. I shook my head violently. No, I can't. I can't face them. Then we're leaving, Sophie declared, taking charge. Right now. As they led me to the car, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Lucas. Just heard what happened. I'm here if you need me. I stared at the message, a mix of gratitude and shame washing over me. How many people had witnessed my humiliation? What do you need, Liv? Ethan asked gently as we drove away. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of exposed secrets pressing down on me. I don't know. I need to disappear for a while. Sophie reached back and squeezed my hand. We've got you, girl. Whatever you need. As the campus faded from view, I realized this wasn't just about one ruined day. Vanessa had shattered the walls I'd built, exposing vulnerabilities I thought were long buried. The road ahead looked dark and uncertain, but for now, all I could do was hold on and try to breathe. The days after Vanessa's graduation blurred together. I barely left my apartment, ignoring calls from work until my boss finally said, "Take some time, Olivia. Your health comes first." I was curled up on the couch when Ethan showed up with grocery bags in hand. "I'm making your favorite pasta," he announced. "I'm not hungry," I mumbled. "Tough. You need to eat." As the smell of garlic filled the air, Sophie burst in. "All right, pity party's over. We're getting you out of this funk." I groaned. "Can I just wallow in peace?" "Nope," Lucas chimed in, appearing behind Sophie. "We're your intervention squad." Despite myself, I cracked a smile. "Some squad. What's the plan?" Sophie plopped down beside me. "First, we eat, then we strategize." Over plates of pasta, my friends brainstormed ideas. "You could sue her for defamation," Ethan suggested. I shook my head. "And drag this out in court? No thanks." Lucas leaned forward. "What about exposing her lies? I bet we could find others she's hurt." The idea sparked something in me. That's not a bad thought. Venus has left a trail of victims. If we could gather their stories. Sophie grinned. "Now we're talking." Operation Takedown Vanessa is a go. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. Where do we start? We divided tasks. Lucas, with his IT skills, would dig into Vanessa's online presence. Sophie, ever the social butterfly, would discreetly reach out to old classmates. Ethan offered to help me organize the evidence. As the days passed, my apartment transformed into command central. Sticky notes covered the walls, each one a piece of Vanessa's web of lies. "Look at this," Lucas called out one evening, waving his laptop. "Vanessa's college blog. She's been stealing other people's stories and passing them off as her own." Sophie burst in, phone in hand. "I just got off the phone with Vanessa's ex-roommate. Apparently, she stole the girl's thesis and tried to submit it as her own." The pieces were falling into place, but something was still missing. I needed to confront my own demons. I think I need to go to therapy," I admitted to Ethan one night. He squeezed my hand. "I'm proud of you, Liv. Want me to help you find someone?" My first session was tough. I've spent so long running from my past, I told Dr. Reeves. "No relation, thankfully." "It's okay to face it now," she assured me. "You're not that helpless child anymore." Week by week, I felt stronger. I started journaling, pouring out years of pent-up emotions. One day, as I sorted through old photos for evidence, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. "Hello, is this Olivia Reeves?" A woman's voice asked. "Yes, who's this?" "My name is Jamie Chen. I'm a journalist with the City Tribune. I was at your stepsister's graduation, and something didn't sit right about her speech. I've been looking into your family's history." My heart raced. "What do you want?" "To hear your side of the story, if you're willing to share it." I hesitated, then thought of everything we'd uncovered. "Actually, Ms. Chen, I think I have a lot to tell you." That night, I called an emergency meeting with my support squad. "A journalist wants to interview me about Vanessa," I announced. Sophie's eyes widened. "Whoa, are you going to do it?" I took a deep breath. "I think I have to. It's time to reclaim my narrative." Lucas nodded approvingly. "We've got enough dirt to bury Vanessa 10 times over." "It's not about burying her," I said, surprising myself. "It's about telling the truth. All of it." Ethan pulled me close. "Whatever you decide, we're with you." As I looked around at my friends, I felt a surge of strength. Vanessa had tried to define me with her lies, but she had failed. I had my own story to tell, and for the first time, I was ready to tell it. The day Jamie Chen's expose hit the newsstands, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. I'd given her everything. The evidence, the testimonies, my own raw, unfiltered truth. Seeing it all laid out in black and white was surreal. "Liv, have you seen this?" Ethan's voice crackled through the phone. "Vanessa's university is revoking her degree." I felt a strange mix of vindication and sadness. It's what she deserves, but still. Sophie burst into my apartment, waving her tablet. "Girl, you won't believe this. Vanessa's law firm just fired her. Apparently, they did some digging after the article came out." It was like dominoes falling. Vanessa's carefully constructed facade was crumbling, and for once I wasn't the one buried in the rubble. Weeks later, I stood outside my childhood home, heart pounding. It was time to face my family. You've got this, Lucas whispered, squeezing my hand before I went in alone. The confrontation was brutal but cathartic. I laid out every painful memory, every manipulation, backed by years of evidence. How could you let this happen? I asked my dad, my voice breaking. He looked older, defeated. Olivia, I'm so sorry. I didn't see. You didn't want to see. I corrected him. Diane tried to interject, but I cut her off. I don't want your excuses or your apologies. I'm here to say goodbye. Walking away from that house for the last time, I felt lighter than I had in years. Months passed. I threw myself into writing my memoir, pouring out every dark secret and hard-won triumph. When it hit the bestseller list, I used the platform to launch a support network for abuse survivors. You're doing amazing things, Liv, Eakin said one night as we celebrated my book's success. I smiled, feeling truly at peace. We're doing amazing things. I couldn't have done this without you all. As for Vanessa, last I heard she was facing fraud charges. But her story wasn't mine anymore. I had my own to write, and for the first time in my life, the future looked brighter than ever.